Hey everybody, Adam here with Hometown Acres. Welcome back. Today we're going to try out a new business venture with the Eastonmade EVO. It's not going to be making firewood for us to sell. I actually had somebody contact me via email and they said they wanted to bring me a load of logs to make for them and just make it right here on the spot, load it in their dump trailer and send them on their way. So we're going to see how that works as a business model with this Eastonmade EVO today. Brought me coffee.
Thank you. That's why I called you.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, how are you?
This is my wife, Alana.
Hi. See you.
You don't ever see her in the videos, but she's here. She's real.
So funny.
All right, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Nice meeting you. The kids are up there.
All right, well, this is Jacob. He's a subscriber to the channel. Jacob, what made you reach out and kind of want to try this out? Because really, this is the first time I've done something like this. You're my guinea pig.
Oh yeah, okay. Like you say, I'm a subscriber to your channel, and watching that machine run, it seemed like a lot easier way to make some firewood. So
Yeah, neighbor Doug stopped over here too.
Here on video.
Well, it was funny because Doug wasn't planning on stopping over. We had no intentions of Doug stopping over, and I told Jacob, because he watches the channel, I said, this is the way things usually go around here.
Yeah.
Doug just, he's got a spidey sense of whenever I'm
there's some excitement.
whenever I'm getting into working or doing something, and he usually just shows up and usually lends a hand. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was saying, as I was watching these roll out of the back of the dump trailer, this is some really nice stuff. I'm actually looking forward to running it through, because all the stuff that we've been running through is getting through all the logs out of our woods that we had taken down over 2 years ago. And so they create a lot of scrap because the outer edges are starting to get a little punky,
Right.
and this stuff still looks pretty fresh and good.
Yep.
So I'm interested to see how much less scrap this stuff makes than the stuff I've been making.
Yeah, this is some oak and maple from last fall, and then some ash and big nut hickory from this year that I've cut down.
So if we can make all of this into firewood in an hour and a half, something like that, I mean, how much time would that save you? Like, how long would it take you to turn this into firewood with your setup?
I just made a quart of firewood, splitting with a maul, mind you,
Oh, wow.
and it took me 5 hours.
Okay.
So, yeah, I said to my son last night, let's see if we can go another route.
Well, anyway, we got the deck loaded up here. Let's fire the machine up and make some wood.
Sounds good. Like something like that with my maul, which I have a splitter for the back of my tractor, but it's so slow. I can split that faster with a maul.
Yeah.
Honestly.
The only time you need a hydraulic splitter if it's slow is if it's naughty or crooked.
Like, I left some naughty stuff at the house because I'm not bringing any of that stuff.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, how long did it take you to get here?
About 25-30 minutes.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Not too bad.
we gotta factor that into your total time savings too, because
that's
you
right.
have time loading it up,
Yep.
getting it here.
Right. Yeah.
But probably, what did you have to load it up?
What did I use?
Yeah, tractor.
Tractor with a grapple. Yeah, just a little Kubota, a
Yeah.
3901 Kubota, and it probably took me, maybe 45 minutes or something like that to load it, I'm gonna guess, you know, by the time I...
One thing I always say is, even if the time is the same, you have to look at the quality of work too.
Yeah.
Because if you're talking 3 hours or 4 hours of loading, trailering, getting here, having it dumped into the trailer, and then going back
Right.
home, and let's say that took you 3 or 4 hours and it would have
Right.
taken you 5 to do it by hand,
Yeah.
those 3 or 4 hours of running equipment versus 5 hours of swinging a splitting maul,
Yeah.
it's a little
Yeah.
different style
Yeah,
of work.
not to mention, you know, running my 461 steel, and
Yeah?
you know, I don't have the
The
bucking
bucking table.
station or
Yeah.
the bucking table. It's the old low back. Yeah.
Yeah.
The old low back gets a little temperamental, you know, the weekend warrior thing.
Yeah.
So when you start to factor in the cost of chiropractic, it starts to make sense pretty fast.
Yeah. So I'm going to have him back right in underneath here of the Japa barrel screener. This is where normally we have our IBC totes. But since he unloaded all the wood, he's got an empty trailer now. We're going to process his wood and go right back into the dump trailer with it. That's good there. I can, because the barrel screener or the conveyor on the end of the barrel screener can articulate, we should be able to fill the front of the dump trailer, the middle of the dump trailer, and then the back of the trailer without having to have him move again. So I think we're looking pretty good right there.
Good.
full IBC tote there and a heaping full trailer. That's a 12 foot long, you said.
12, yeah.
12 foot long, how wide? Like
7.
7 wide, 12 long, and
Yeah.
I don't know, you're 4 foot high at the middle there.
Yeah.
So, what do you guys figure? Cord and a half? Almost 2 quarts?
A quarter and a half in that probably.
And then another quarter of a cord here, or third of a cord anyhow.
Yeah.
Well, was that better than doing it with an axe and splitting them all and all that?
I don't know, let me think about it for a minute. Yeah.
Okay. Look at that, the old F-350, it isn't even squatting on them. Full IBC tote. A heck of a full load in the trailer.
Yeah, I think an hour and 15 minutes, we'll call it. And this is probably...
It's knocking on 2 quarters, don't you think?
Yeah, I'd be curious to see. Are you gonna stack this when you get home?
Well, I don't know if I'll stack it all today, but I will stack it eventually.
Yeah, I'll be curious when you do get it stacked up what it turns out to. Because I think a loose thrown basket like that is probably a quarter cord.
Okay.
And I bet you have a cord and a half in here because you've got a side rail on here, which is letting you go up higher.
I think this is definitely a quarter and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you're 1 3/4 cords.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And that's what I always tell people too. Like when you buy firewood, the wood is free. What you're paying for is the equipment to process it, make it, deliver it, do all that stuff.
Right.
Like if somebody wanted to come here and pick up a load of logs in their own dump trailer and load themselves and whatever,
Yeah.
it might be like $50 for a dump trailer.
Right.
Like the wood itself is cheap.
Right. Yeah.
But it's the turning it into this that
what
is...
did the firewood guy say he pays for a track? So 700 or 800 tracks?
So he buys 2 different kinds of firewood poles. One is firewood poles, which are lower quality. He said that there's really no requirements for them as far as how nice they have to be. And then he buys what's called scrag poles, which is there can only be 1 hook in the log.
Yeah.
They have to be at least a minimum of 6 inches on the small end.
Okay.
So there's a little bit more requirements. Yeah. So he said his cost per cord, I think, was like $115 per cord on for just the logs of firewood poles, and then it's like $135 per cord with the scrag poles, the higher quality logs. But he said what he pays, that incremental cost to buy the scrag poles, he makes back in efficiency because he can make wood faster.
Yeah.
With the nicer quality poles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I think if I had to guess, I'm going to call this 1 3/4 cords, and I think we did it in about an hour and 15 minutes. So that puts us well over a cord an hour, and that's loading the machine. All of this is screened as well, so there's going to be a lot less junk mixed in with the wood. So I think
Yeah. I think it was a pretty good deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I wanted to take a closer look at whether processing logs for somebody else makes sense as a business. I also want to take a look at whether it makes sense from the customer standpoint, because If it makes sense and it's profitable for me to do, but it doesn't make sense for the customer, then I'm not going to have any customers to sell the service to. So we got to look at both sides of that. You're probably wondering what I charged Jacob. I told him from the get-go it was $150 an hour for me to run the equipment, and I've got a significant investment down there between the excavator, the Eastonmade EVO, the barrel screener, and the building. Now, as far as actual time involved, the total time from start to finish was about an hour and 20 minutes. Of that time, 15 minutes was running the excavator loading logs, and about an hour and 5 minutes was running the Eastonmade EVO and the tumble screener. And I am not including in that time any setup time or cleanup after. I'll probably have another 20 or 30 minutes going down there and cleaning up the scrap, the sawdust, and getting rid of all that. So at $150 an hour times 1 hour and 20 minutes, Jacob wrote me a check for $200. He texted me later that day and said that he got home and got it all stacked up, and it worked out to about 1.5 cords. So that works out to roughly, if you take $200 divided by 1.5, it works out to about $133 would be your cost to bring logs to me and have them process them up for you. And that's where you as the consumer has to decide whether that is worth it to you or if that's too expensive. A large factor in making that decision is what can you go out and buy already cut and split firewood out in the open marketplace. Around here, it's about $400 a cord delivered. So that 1.5 cords that we sent Jacob home with is worth about $600 once it's fully seasoned. So again, that's where the consumer has to decide whether you'd rather go out and just buy already cut, split, seasoned firewood for $400 per cord, or bring your logs to somebody who has a processor and pay roughly $133 a cord. You are going to save some money, but you're also providing the wood. I can see both sides. If you genuinely enjoy cutting and splitting firewood, it's probably not worth it. It's probably too expensive. It's not worth the hassle of loading the logs up and bringing them somewhere to have them cut and split. But as Jacob said, it takes him about 5 hours to cut and split 1 cord of wood. And so we basically just saved him at 1.5 cords about 7.5 hours of manual labor cutting with a chainsaw and splitting with a maul. Essentially, if he had done it himself, he would have saved himself $200, but had an extra 7.5 hours worth of sweat equity, which would have paid him about $26 an hour to do it himself. Again, is it worth it to you to not have to do that manual backbreaking work versus running a tractor, throwing some logs in a dump trailer and bringing them over? To each their own. So that's the consumer side of it. Now let's look at it from the business side. We need to figure out what our cost is to provide that service for somebody else. And I've got some notes here. That's why I have the iPad. I've got quite a significant investment down there. The excavator costs about $60,000. The EVO right now costs about $68,000. And that barrel screener from Japa is about $14,000. I figure the excavator cost me about $20 per hour in depreciation, about $7.50 per hour in fuel, and then miscellaneous maintenance costs of about $2.50 per hour, for a total operating cost of about $30 per hour that I'm running that excavator. And like I said before, we only ran the excavator to load the live deck, and so that was about 15 minutes to load. I think we did 2.5 decks on the EVO. So 1, 2, and then another half of a deck. So the cost for the excavator for 15 minutes at $30 per hour was about $7.50 for the excavator. I think a reasonable depreciation expense for the Eastonmade EVO is about $25 per hour. It burns about $10 an hour in fuel. And these are all just estimates, but the maintenance cost per hour, I'm thinking it's going to be about $5. So a total hourly cost to run the EVO is $40 per hour, and we ran the EVO for 1 hour and 5 minutes for a total cost of $43. So right now the excavator's at $750, the EVO is at $43. The barrel screener is the last piece, and that's pretty simple because it doesn't have its own engine. It runs off the hydraulics of the EVO. There's very little maintenance, very little that can go wrong. The hardest part is figuring out what the useful life of a barrel screener is, because it seems pretty indestructible. It looks like it should last forever, but let's say it's 7 years, something like that. I figure that the average depreciation cost on that barrel screener is about $7 per hour, and it had the same amount of runtime as the EVO, so we'll say a total cost of $8. So total equipment cost, just the equipment part of it, is about $58 to cut up that wood and get it loaded in the dump trailer for Jacob there. Now we need to assign a reasonable hourly wage. And I think probably $25 for a good operator's fare. And we had total time was 1 hour and 20 minutes times $25 an hour, $33.25 for a wage. Now, I saved the business money by being an owner operator and doing the labor myself. But if I had to hire somebody to do that, I think that's a fair assumption. So the total equipment cost was $58 and the reasonable wage would have been $33.25 for a total cost of $92 to the business. Now we charged Jacob $200, leaving a profit for the business of $108. Not bad, right? Well, there's a couple things that we haven't talked about yet. The first thing that I didn't include is the cost of the building, because you don't need it, but it is a real cost to me because I did build it. It's nice to have. Another one is insurance, okay? Everybody's insurance rates are gonna be different, so it's hard to put something like that into this calculation. Another one is taxes. Everybody's tax rate or effective tax rate is gonna be different. And then the last one is just kind of it's a big barrier to entry. Total cost of equipment invested down there is about $142,000. That is a big chunk of change to invest in a business. And when you're investing that much into a business, there's a lot of risks in not being profitable and losing money. The biggest one is not staying busy. All those numbers that I just outlined are like looking at that job in a vacuum with no external factors. To actually be profitable, you've got to do that job probably 4 times a day, 5 times a week, with little to no breakdowns and no major market disruptions. If the machines aren't running to capacity, they're probably costing you money and not making you money. So that's where the risk is. If you're going to be putting $142,000 of investment into the business, you've got to make sure you can keep those machines running and generating income. But I guess to wrap it up, the way I see it, it is profitable and worth doing, processing logs for other people. We've already taken a look at firewood business as a whole. You can make money as long as you're charging enough for the wood. That's where most people run into the problem, is they only charge $200 for a cord of firewood. In order to be profitable, you do have to charge more than that. But processing logs for other people is definitely worth doing, and it is another way to keep the machines running and keep them busy. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, give me a big thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.